Hello, welcome to day 10. So some exciting news out of the Cursor team. Yesterday I was complaining that when I use Cursor and I make changes in between steps with the agent, it ignores what I've done and overwrites my work. Well, turns out a couple of days ago, version 0.45 was released. So now the agent sees recent changes. Among other things, there's some other cool stuff here. But this is the one I'm most excited about, and this means I'm probably pretty much done with Windsurf if this works. The only issue is I wasn't able to update from the UK to the latest version. So things I tried was I was doing the command palette, and then attempt update, like nothing happened. Tried downloading the installer from the website and running that. It was downloading the old version. Tried proxying into most of the states in the USA and then trying this again, still didn't work. So eventually decided to ask Perplexity. Perplexity confirmed that it's not globally available. And I was trying to again, figure out what region is it available to try this again, but then it turns out you can force install it using Homebrew. So actually, I've got it. So yeah, we'll be using that today. Okay, so today I want to get the actual lead qualification bot started at least, and I want to implement it using Pipecat flows. So the first step is to come up with a new flow I'm heading towards, because I want to change up the one I've got over here on the left, which is basically was previously built on VAPI using this system prompt. So the way I want it to work now, we're going to greet the caller, get the caller's name, ask which service they're interested in. Are they interested in voice agent development or a technical consultation? If they're interested in a technical consultation, we can redirect them to the consultancy booking page and then close the call. If they're interested in voice agent development, there's then going to be a lead qualification process where we identify the use case, establish what timescales they've got in mind, their budget, and assess their interaction with the bot so far, if they think it's satisfactory or not. And then based on that, we'll determine whether or not they're qualified. If they are qualified, we redirect to the discovery page where they can book a discovery call. And if they're not, then might as well redirect them to the consultancy page so that perhaps we can help them figure out the rest of this if they were unsure about any of those details, and then close the call in either case. Okay, so it is day 10 now, but I do remember that back on day 3, I remember checking this in, which is where I got a pantomime of the desired flow working in a simple flow rather than a dynamic flow. So I'm just going to actually copy it from this flow config from that check-in and work based on that and convert it to a dynamic flow. So I moved it over and the flow actually works. Check it out.
Hi there. Thanks for giving us a call. May I have your name, please?
That's John.
Great to meet you, John. What kind of voice AI needs are you looking into?
I need something to handle out-of-hours calls.
That sounds like a smart solution. Do you have a timeline in mind for starting this project, and when are you hoping to have it up and running?
Next week.
Got it. And do you have a budget in mind for this voice AI solution? If you're not sure yet, we have some tiered options I can walk you through.
£2,000.
Thanks for sharing that information, John. Before you go,
Okay, anyway, so it was going to ask me about the quality of the interaction there. You get the idea. So the voice I'm using, by the way, is DeepGram because, I mean, it's cheap, but it's, as you can hear, it sounds pretty awful, right? So I'm going to change that to Cartesia at some point and also mess with the pipeline in terms of what's dealing with the voice activity detection in terms of just switching out Celero's basic one to the one that was demonstrated in the very first video that started this whole process off. And also one other thing that's worth mentioning is that actually in the settings, so I was just reading the flows documentation again. In cursor settings, here in the features, even though the Pipecat document scraping failed, it did get the flows document. So I reckon it might be worth seeing how far cursor can get converting this from a simple flow to a dynamic flow. I've also deleted all the cal.com stuff from here because I'm not going to be using that now. I'm not going to be taking the email address and booking it on the calls because that's never 100% reliable, and there's a very easy way of getting 100% reliability by directing the user who is going to be using a widget on a website to a booking page. So let's just do that. Yeah, so I'm really thinking that Cursor might be the one IDE to rule them all now. So this is pretty cool. So I decided to start speaking to it as if it's Cascade, like in Windsurf. And I said, could you please refer to the Pipecat flows documentation in Pipecat? And that's the reference to the documentation. Then transform the static flow in here into a dynamic flow. If you have any questions you need me to answer before you do so, please ask. And it's actually said in the provided documentation, it doesn't contain specific information about dynamic flows. So I think actually the documentation scraping didn't work. But no worries, because I've actually got a document there with which I've scraped into Markdown, basically. This page scraped into Markdown. The other thing I wanted to give it, though, is a new example of dynamic flows, which I got from the Pipecat flows repository. Put that in there. And I said, can you check the example and the documents and see if that's sufficient to answer your questions? Also told it I want to make all the transitions dynamic, actually. And yes, from that, it's been able to figure out exactly how to transform into a dynamic flow. So you see here, we have the dictionary, which maps handlers to transition handlers. So function handlers to transition handlers. A bunch of new transition handlers and some function handlers. So yeah, I'll be going through this, seeing how that works. But yeah, that's pretty quick. Okay, yeah, interesting stuff. So I tried running it just as it generated all the stuff, and after the first node I got this. Identify use case in node identify use case has neither handler nor transition to. So that's because in here there basically was no handler and no transition callback, and as you can see both of those are required. So what I did initially, I said I see the error, I explained what the issue was, and I pointed it at the docs again and asked if it could fix it again, and all it did was just add the handler. So then I said you've added the handlers but not the transition callback, so then I copied this from this doc and put it in there. And then it says, oh yes, I see we need to add the transition callback. So it's done that. And then it said, well, this means we can remove the global transition callback. And that's nope, can't do that. That's the main thing that handles everything, right? So I rejected that line and then just accepted the rest of the file. And now I'm going to test it. Yeah, so it actually turns out the cursor agent was right and I was wrong about the requirement for there being a transition callback when you've got a global transition handler. I actually think it might now be one or the other because there is no transition handler, global transition handler in this flow manager, but then you do have the transition callbacks specified in each of the create node functions. So I've just removed them again from the create node functions, and we're using this mapping from function handler to transition handler and then a transition callback in the flow manager. I think that's the best approach, and I think that matches the insurance example here, which I actually read through now again to remind myself how that actually works. So that was a bit of a learning experience. And yeah, I was getting a nasty error, which is why I made this little document here and figured this out. But now it sort of works. So yeah, now I just need to sort out the flow. So we'll get to that. Okay, I just want to tell you what I did. It's not working though. But what I did was go into Excalibur, export an image, copy to clipboard, and then go and say, and paste it here and say, could you modify the dynamic flow so that it follows the process depicted in the attached diagram? So we had a good try at that. And the code does run, and the bot does run without errors, but it's just not transitioning node to node correctly. Also, it added a logger and then didn't initialize it, so I had to sort that out, but no worries. So yeah, but this is not the worst thing that I could be starting with, so I just have to go through this and make it work now. Starting, of course, with the first node and first transition. Okay, so after the bot's done its thing, I decided that I wanted to merge the initial greeting node with the node that gets the name. So basically it's going to introduce itself as Chris and then ask for the caller's name. And so I deleted the create name node, and this is now create greet and collect name node. And then some other things I had to change is remove the greet handler from there. I think I deleted also a greet handler. It probably wasn't actually a handler for that, a function handler for that rather. And then renamed this to create greet and collect name node when you're setting up the service and when you're handling the first participant. Now, what's interesting is that this bit here doesn't exist anywhere. I think that this might just be naming that node, and you can call it whatever you want. So, I mean, that part was pretty confusing, and this was like the most confusing part, and this was the code that I wrote myself, and I was trying to figure out why this worked rather than anything that the bot worked, which seemed to, with the agent, Cursor's agent, which made perfect sense to me. But yeah, anyway, so this does now branch, like I'll show you.
Hello. Thanks for calling John George Voice AI Solutions. I'm Chris, your voice AI agent today. May I have your name, please?
Yeah, it's John.
Thanks, John. Are you interested in our technical consultation services or in voice agent development today?
Voice agent development, please.
Great choice. Could you please tell me a bit more about your specific use case requirements for the voice agent development?
I need an agent to handle out-of-hours calls.
That sounds like a valuable solution. Do you have a desired timeline or any specific deadlines for getting this up and running?
I need it done by the end of this month.
Thanks, that's helpful to know. Could you also share the budget you have in mind for this project?
Okay, so it's going through that lead qualification flow. Let's try the consultation one.
Hello there. Welcome to John George Voice AI Solutions. My name is Chris, and I'm your friendly voice AI agent. May I have the pleasure of knowing your name, please?
Sure, it's John.
Great to meet you, John. Are you interested in our technical consultation service, or is it our voice agent development service?
Technical consultation.
Thanks for letting me know, John.
Okay, so you see that it's failed because at this point it wants to redirect me to a page where I can book that consultancy, and I haven't written that function yet. And further, I haven't established how exactly to communicate between the server and the client yet. So that's the next step I'm going to figure out. Okay, so better let you know what I'm doing before I forget. So essentially I've established that the RTVI server sends events to the RTVI client, and using the client SDK you get just like a general overview of the hooks that are available to subscribe to events if you like, and that's pretty much it. So then I got the actual source code for the SDK, which is here, and open that in Windsurf because I'm going to use, I have a month left of Windsurf, so I might as well use it to chat to some code bases just in chat mode. So I asked it if it can give me an overview of the React client source code and told it what I'm trying to figure out. And it gave me some boilerplate that I can use on the client side. And I asked it a more specific question about if I want to send an event from my server, which tells my bot to navigate to a different page, how would I do that? It's probably guessing this, and this is Node, so I'm going to have to carry on investigating that, but it has still given me this. And I've also just been looking at the source code for RTVI event in the JS bit, and these are all the events that you can subscribe to. Like user transcript and bot transcript. So I also recognize this from, let me see, where was it? No, it's in the Pipecat. Where is Pipecat? There we go. So in the debug display, yeah. So in this example for the simple chatbot, you were getting a load of logs in there. One of them is transcript, and this is how it's doing that. So it's checking if it's the final log. So presumably that means you can also stream the log as it comes in if you wanted to write that logic. But this is just waiting for the final log for whoever has spoken to say that, and then it will log the whole thing. It actually logs the bot transcript and the user of transcript separately, which makes sense because they're different events. So yeah, I'm going to have to define a custom event, send it from my server when I've determined that the user is interested in booking something, and then navigate based on that. So let's do that. Okay, so what I need to figure out is how this bot OpenAI on the server is sending events to the debug display, and more specifically, how I can define a custom event of my own to send from the bot to the front end. So I asked Cascade how it's working now, did its analysis. This uses multiple flow steps to actually read the whole file, but it actually did read the whole file, which is good, so I'm not going to complain. And it came up with this explanation. And then I think I said, so if I want to add my own custom event, how would I do that? So you use your RTVI processor's emit method, it said. So it said emit again, right? So I thought, okay, well, maybe that's correct. And again, in the debug display, it's using this same, well, actually, hang on. It's using this same pattern where I can just have a custom string as RTVI event and then use a callback on that. And it gave this summary, and I was optimistic about this, but I decided I'd better go and check. So, let me see. I was in here, and I wanted to check this RTVI processor. So this is the thing which supposedly has an emit method on it. So if I go to definition, you can see it here. This was a bit difficult to read, so I went into the outline, close everything up. This processor's at the bottom, and I have a look at all the declared methods on there, and I don't see an emit on here actually. Right? So then I said RTVI is of type RTVI processor, and I'm not seeing any emit message here on this class. So it checks it and goes, you're right, I apologize. Instead, you need to use this one. Okay? Now, just out of curiosity, I asked it, where did you get the idea for emit in the first place? And it said it's just a commonly used pattern, and it made the assumption that this is the one. And now it's confident that this is the way to do it. And I'm not sure that it's right, so I'm just going to carry on trying to figure this out myself. Okay, so I just thought I'd ask it another question. Why did you now decide that this is the correct function? Seems like that's not meant to be used publicly with the underscore prefix, which is a convention which indicates this is a private information detail, like a private function. If you were using something like Java or C# or anything like that, you'd know about that. And it agrees that I'm right, and now it's saying that I need to use the pipeline processor's push frame method. So yeah, define a custom frame type, push it through the pipeline, have the RTVI observer handle it and convert it to a message, is what it's thinking. Who knows? I'll carry on checking. Okay, so I asked Cascade to please double check its understanding by looking for any examples of the pattern it described here being used in the examples. And this is where it's saying push the frame, right? So then it's decided that it's actually incorrect. It needs to correct its previous understanding. So client communication is handled through the message system, and frames Frames are used for internal pipeline processing. So, yeah, so custom frames in the examples are used for internal pipeline processing, not for client communication. RTVI client communications happens through a well-defined system. Okay, so then it's asked, would you like me to show you how to implement a custom event in the RTVI framework? I said, yes, please do. So then it's suggesting we need to edit the actual RTVI thing. So then I've explained that actually this is a package, right? If you don't have access to that, how could I do it? How could the simple chatbot example they provided in the bot OpenAI achieve this? So what it's saying I should do is actually create my own class extending the RTVI processor, and then have a public method there that uses the push transport message, which it said I should be using before to do it. So, and this again, it always remains the same, it seems. So I'm just going to try this and see what happens. Why not? Okay, so I asked it to make a general description of the process required to add a custom event to a bot server and then hook into it in a React component. And it wrote this guide, and I thought I was just going to be able to copy this like you can in Cursor. But no, there's actually no way to copy this. So I said, well, since I can't copy the guide, and also since they gave me a general description, I told it what specifically I'm trying to do, right? Send a page navigation request from the server to the client, which will then be used by the component to redirect the user to a specific page. So it's written this little guide, and I was just curious, why is this label there? And it turns out this is a requirement, apparently. Every single RTVI message class has that, so that's encouraging. So yeah, I'm going to take this, move it over, and then give it a go. Okay, so I tried it and it didn't work on the client side. The client side implementation didn't work. We might need to check the server side as well now. Although, no, I think it's working okay. Let me actually just check that now. Flow is actually sending a type. Type, okay, right. So instead of sending a specific event, a new event, which is what was being expected on the client side, I believe we're sending a message now and switching by type. And I'm just trying to log it to the console. So actually, why don't we just try and run it now, see if it works. Seems so unlikely, but just give it a quick run. Okay, well, obviously now I need to connect. And actually I need to stop this and run that again. So localhost. There's almost no way this is going to work. I mean, let's be realistic. So, okay, let's just see what happens.
Hello there. This is Chris speaking, your voice AI agent from John George Voice AI Solutions.
Can I book a consultancy, please?
Of course. I'd be happy to help you with that. Before we proceed, could I have your name, please?
It's John.
Thank you, John. Which service are you interested in booking?
Consultancy.
Great choice, John. I'll go ahead and redirect you to our consultancy.
Okay, so it didn't work. Okay, no worries. That's before the actual event is sent. So I mean, the message is sent. So yeah, I'll have to fix that first. Just want to say that this Cursor new version, which is supposed to take into account changes that you've made between queries to the agent, doesn't seem to have made much of a difference, because it still will just overwrite what I've done with what it thinks is right, which is pretty annoying, but it is what it is. Okay, so I just figured it's not working yet, but I figured I'd take you through the most recent commits, and I'm doing this on its own branch because I knew this was going to be nightmare fuel. So the front end, fair enough, that's eventually going to log something, and then in the flow py we've got the new event and the event message. Okay, not sure if that's going to work. Then so this then created some post actions in the flow configs, so the create nodes, which creates the flow config nodes. So this was actually trying to do the redirects in the post actions. So I had to fix that because that's not the right way to do it. So let me have a look. Where are we? Here. So then I sort of actually tried to change that up because for the error I was getting, I thought maybe it was actually the post action not configured correctly, and then finally I figured out that actually no, you need to set up the functions properly, like in all the other node configs, and then you have to set up the handlers to handle the redirect. So now the way that it's breaking is a specific way, which is that the way I'm trying to send messages to my client isn't correct, because it's doing, just see if I can find it, flow manager has no attribute bot. So in my handle, the handle redirects here in these functions, I'm doing a flow manager.bot.request navigation, which isn't right. Somewhere in here there was a request navigation method, I believe, that I've started. Flowbot. Yeah. So it's this function that I should be trying to call. So I'm going to see if there's any way of doing that. You know, I'm doing, as I say, I'm doing this in its own branch because this might all be just complete failure and a learning exercise. You know, that's just how it goes. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So I explained that I'm getting this error saying that the flow manager has no attribute bot. I was trying to figure out, is there a way to actually access this from the handler, given that the flow manager doesn't have that and we're trying to call something in the flow bot. And what it cleverly did, actually, I mean, I don't know how great of an idea this is in the long run, but it seems pretty smart to me. You can just add functions, actually, to classes, just like this. So we said this is function, create a new reference to a method here and point it to the request navigation on the flowbot, and then suddenly you're able to access it from there. So that's fair enough. Then there was another issue with the way we were calling, where's the push transport message? So it was self.push transport message. Now, obviously, that's not on the flowbot class. It's actually on the RTVI processor, and the processor is initialized in the framework. All right. So I actually just tried pointing this out to the box. I was still a bit confused at this time, and it really just couldn't figure out what to do, and it's doing message.dict, etc. and all this. And when the message.dict function was there, it was saying that method is deprecated and you need to use instead another one, which appeared in error, model dump, right? So I saw here then when I just actually, the first thing I did was change the, where's it gone? You're right. I changed the self.push transport message to self.rtvi.push transport message, and then I started getting this. So then obviously I figured out I needed to delete the .dict there, and now when I run it, it does seem to call the function happily, but there is no sign that the client is receiving the message. So that's what I need to figure out now. Hopefully that was clear. Okay, so I've been doing some debugging, haven't been able to get this working yet. So here's the situation though. So I tried to log all the incoming messages in the Pipecat widget, and there's nothing here, there should be something logged before the meeting ends, and there's nothing coming through. Okay, so then I was wondering actually if there's something wrong with the format of the message we're using. So I asked actually in Windsurf, in the Pipecat one. So I said, this is the function I'm using on my server to push the custom messages. Right, I think that the structure of the message itself might not be right according to what the processor is expecting. Can you check? And essentially I looked through this and found the only difference really is there's a missing ID. So I added that. It didn't make any difference. Okay. So what I actually meant though when I said this is I think here in the client, the way in the example it's handling this is with these events, right? Which is what we were trying to make before. So I'm going to have to actually, I think, just spend a bit of time with this, reading it and understanding it, and then come back to this later. So I think that's enough recording for one day. I'm taking tomorrow off, so I'll be back on Monday for day 11. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.